title of today's presentation is Instant Insights, Automation and Action with Power BI, Power Apps, Flow, and Azure Machine Learning. As you can see, I really wanted to go for a short and easy to say title. So covering a lot of topics here, as you can imagine. Just a little bit about me. My name is Anthony Bulk. I'm a director at Sierra Systems, a NTT data company. And I lead the data and AI team within the Canadian branch. I'm also a co-host and regularly present at the Power BI user group here in Victoria, BC, Canada. And I am a Microsoft data platform MVP, which means I regularly present and blog and try to contribute and give back to the community as much as I can. So just to give a quick overview of the different components that we're going to be talking about today and kind of help to understand how they interact. The first thing I'll be talking about, of course, is Power BI. So within Power BI, I'm going to be embedding a Power App. I'm going to be hooking that up to Flow, passing data into Azure Machine Learning, and then having the data come back in real time to an API-enabled data set. And then I'm also going to touch on, how you could, within that dashboard, create alerts to further automate the whole process if desired. So yeah, it's Power BI, Power Apps, Microsoft Flow, the Azure Machine Learning Studio platform, and that's it. So just to talk a little bit about what these different tools are. So, Power Apps, that's really like kind of a low-code, no-code type of platform for building apps. It's bundled with Office 365 and Dynamics 365, and it costs about $7 per month per user for plan 1, or for a more extensive plan, it's about $40 per user per month. That's in US and that's list price. So Power Apps is really geared towards being able to rapidly build apps that are usable and integrate with other platforms, but can also be used on your phone. There's actually like a Power App that you can download for iOS, Android. I'm not sure if they have it for Windows Phone anymore, but it allows you to create apps that you can consume on your mobile device or also on your PC. So Power BI, it's really geared towards being able to get data quickly and present something that is visually stunning in a very short amount of time. The mantra was 5 seconds to data, 5 minutes to wow. So it's really geared towards kind of agile analytics. It is available in the cloud or on-prem, with Power BI Report Server. That comes with SQL Server if you have Active Software Assurance and Enterprise Edition, or you can also get the on-prem version if you have Power BI Premium. And again, like with a lot of these products, it's bundled with Office 365 and Dynamics. And there is kind of 3 flavors, as I mentioned, the on-premise version. There's also an embedded version, which is capacity-based. You're basically paying for a certain amount of CPU and RAM in a Microsoft data center, and then you can embed that into your web application, for example. And just to give you a sense of the cost, there is a free version, but it's limited with regards to your ability to distribute content. There's a pro version, which is about, I think this slide's a little bit outdated, but it's gone up a little bit in price, but it's about $10 per month. And then the premium, where you have a dedicated node, that is about $6,000 per month per node. So Microsoft Flow, that's really a tool to automate workflows. It's again kind of a low-code, no-code type of solution. It's again bundled with Office 365 and Dynamics 365. It allows you to kick off jobs and to integrate and automate tasks, as I'll demonstrate today. And again, there's a free version. There's a plan 1, which is about $5 per month. Plan 2, which is about $15 per month. So it's a nice way to start to automate certain tasks. And then the last thing is the Azure Machine Learning Studio. It's really almost like a rapid application development platform, cloud first. It's and it is really geared towards rapidly building data science projects. So it's kind of, drag, drop, and configure type of paradigm, but it does have the ability to extend and, drop in your own Python or R modules if required. And again, it has a free version, and if you, but there are limits with it. And if you need the paid version, it's about, $10 per month or $1 per studio experimentation hour. So those are the tools that I'll be covering today. And now I'll be actually diving into a demo. So, so first I'll show you the end result. I don't, just in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of walk backwards, show you something that is pre-built and stitched together, and then show you how it was assembled. Because to me, this is like the interesting world that we're in now. There's all these different cloud technologies, all these different APIs, and we're really at the point where we're just trying to discover ways to integrate them to solve new problems. And there's all these new kind of patterns emerging and options available to basically enhance and do some unique problem solving of different business scenarios. So what I'm going to show you here, this is a Power BI dashboard. And what it's showing you is essentially customer analysis. It's wholesale customers. Imagine the scenario where you're interacting with, wholesale customers, and you want to get some insights from the customer, but at the same time, as you're, talking with them on the phone or, in person, you're trying to understand their purchasing history, but you also want to make updates, and you want to say, hey, you know what, this person is going to buy something, right? And I want to add that and see how it looks in real time. So the dashboard is comprised of a bunch of different tiles. So you can see the first tile here. This is a Power App that's embedded inside a Power BI dashboard. These tiles here, these are all just cards that are connected to a report that's surfacing up different metrics that's coming from the data set. And then down below, I have some different visuals that show the data in different kind of slices and different views, as well as kind of a table that shows the raw data set. So I'll show you what happens now if I go and create a new customer. I'll create one here. Maybe I'll Mr. Guy Smiley. And he's coming in from channel number 2. He's in region number 3. Let's say he spends $500 on fresh, $200 on milk product, $300 on grocery product, $1 on frozen, and $3 on detergent, and $45 on delicacy. And this is a new customer, so I don't know which category he belongs to. So I'm going to leave this blank. And I'm going to click the submit button. And if everything goes well, I did pray to the demo gods this morning, you can see that after hitting the submit button, roughly 5 seconds later, or less than 5 seconds, you can see that the numbers went up. It was 10, now it's 11. You can see all these numbers went up. It's all based on this new entry that I just created in here. So in almost near real time, from when I enter the data and hit submit, I can see updates to the dashboard, and I can start to understand and analyze this new customer and all my customers and compare him and say, hey, well, how does Mr. Guy Smiley compare to other customers? I'll just show you here down below so you can see, Mr. Guy Smiley, he's a big spender when it comes to fresh produce compared to the other customers. All the other customers are spending like $2 or less, right? Mr. Guy Smiley, he's, we probably want to keep him happy. He's a happy guy and happy customer. Happy life. And you can see down below here that Mr. Guy Smiley, he was automatically placed into category 3. I can go and create a new customer here and say, okay, we got a new customer. This is Mr. Guy Smiley's cousin. He is in the same channel, but actually I know which category he belongs to. I've done business with this guy before. He's always in category 2. So I'm going to place him in there. I'm going to hit the submit button. And you'll see that the numbers bump up. So it went from 11 till 12. And you can also see that I have the new, cousin in there, and he's now placed in category 2 because I explicitly entered that in. So now I'm going to explain how this was put together. Actually, sorry, before I do that, maybe I'll just click on one of these tiles and navigate down to the underlying report. So if I click on one of the tiles here, you can see this takes me down to the underlying report. And this just gives me some more detailed information regarding the customers. I can further analyze it. And I can also, modify this report or subscribe to it. All the usual things that you can do with, Power BI reports are available. So now I've shown you this capability, and it's really the ability to, when you're in that analysis mode, to stay in that mode and enable data entry or enable write back by leveraging Power Apps. I've also, in behind the scenes, you didn't see it, but used machine learning to automatically place a customer in a category if I didn't know, which category to put them in. For example, it's a new customer, or maybe even potentially, if their spending habits have changed and I don't know what category I should put them in anymore. I can let the machine learning algorithm figure that out for me. So how did I do this? Well, let's start from the kind of inside out. And by starting from the inside out, I'll maybe just flip back to my slide deck. I'll unpack it from the Power App and kind of work my way out from there. So the first thing you'll do is create a very simple Power App. So Power App, if you create a brand new one, you can, start with something that is, made for a tablet or a phone. You can pick your layout. You can also generate an app based on data. So it can read essentially a data model and say, hey, based on these fields, it looks like you need an app that has these fields in it to allow you for, insert, update, and delete operations. And when you first go and create a blank one, it just gives you like a completely blank canvas where you go and drag and drop the different widgets that you want onto that app. So it's a very nice, user-friendly, business-friendly way to go and build stuff. And so you can see here I have a blank one. You can do things like drag in text fields and add them to the canvas, reposition them, right? Do all the usual things. So I'm not going to go through the process of building it. I'll just show you the one that I built. I didn't spend a lot of time to make it pretty. Essentially, I just did what I just showed you, created a blank phone app and just added in a bunch of text fields, and then I added in a button. So with that in mind, I'll go back to my app. I'm not going to save that one. So the key thing is when you're building your app, you need to be kind of mindful of what you're calling the different text fields. So here's the app I built. I have one text field for the customer's name, one for the channel, one for the region. So, and as you're dragging and dropping these different text fields in, spend a little bit of time just to give it an appropriate name and to define the format type. You don't have to spend a huge amount of time. I think I spent 20 minutes putting this app together. I could have made it a lot more pretty, a lot more bells and whistles, but the purpose was really just to show how kind of quickly you can assemble something that is usable and gives you the functionality you need to provide that quick analysis capability. Now so once you kind of build the app, the submit button will at first just not take any action. And the reason why you want to have it left blank is because you need to go and create the flow first. And then once you create the flow, then you can create the submit button, which goes and takes an action. And you can see here, you can say, hey, let's kick off a flow. But to do that, you have to have the flow built. So enabling the button to take an action should be done after the flow is created. So that's the app. So again, kind of working my way out from here. So I'll skip over the flow for now, and I'll jump right into the Azure Machine Learning. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because the whole demo that I'm showing you today is based on a pre-canned experiment that you can go and grab for free in this platform. So whenever you go and create a new machine learning experiment, the first thing you'll do is you'll see like essentially a whole gallery. And so one of these example experiments is customer segmentation. So I leverage I'm a lazy programmer. I like to use things that are like templates or reusable as much as possible. So I found one that fit my scenario, which was to kind of analyze and update customer data. So I grabbed that from the gallery. And then by doing that, it gives you essentially something that's pre-configured and that you can just modify. But I'll show you what it looks like if you don't find something like a template that fits your purpose and you have something that's unique. So I'll just show you, if you create a brand new blank experiment, it's very much a drag, drop, and configure type of paradigm. So you can see it's guiding you on what to put where. And it's really telling you, hey, well, the first thing I need is data. So you can go and grab some sample data. Or if you have something uploaded, you can do that too. So I'll just, for example, drop that in. The next thing you might want to do is split the data and say, okay, well, I'm going to save some for training and save some for validation. And each one of these modules is configurable and allows you to, define how the split is happening. So it could be just a simple 50-50 split, or you could do like split based on an expression, or like on a stratified split. So you have the way of kind of divvying up the data for training and experimentation. The next thing you'll want to do is train. And then you'll need to drop in some type of machine learning algorithm here. And actually, maybe I'll, instead of jumping to that, I'll show you all the different options that are available. So at a high level, there's anomaly detection, classification, clustering, and regression. In this scenario, let's say I want to classify, how much the different people are going to make. You can say, oh, well, this is a 2-class decision forest, for example. It allows you to really quickly go and hook these things up, and then you can score this model down below. Say, okay, well, let's compare this to that. And then the last thing we got to do is say, okay, well, what are we going to train on? And income is the maybe thing that I want to predict. And you can see, in a matter of very short order here. Oops, I think I clicked OK. So if I click OK here, I now have a experiment that I can run, and I can test out and see and compare results. I also have the ability with this platform to daisy chain and compare different algorithms. So I can use the evaluate module to allow me to hook up and compare different algorithms and say, hey, you know what? I thought that the 2-class decision jungle was going to give me good results, but I also think that there might be a better classifier that I can use. So I can add that, add the evaluate, compare it, and really start to very rapidly iterate through and try different experiments to find the best fit for purpose. And so let's say that I'm happy with this one, looks great. I can really quickly convert this into a predictive web service. And then once that's run, I can convert it into an API that I can integrate into anything. So I can, in really short order, I can have a really well-performing customized machine learning model that I can integrate into anything, whether it's a flow or a app or any kind of system that will allow me to send a JSON document to it and get a JSON response back. So I'll flip to the experiment that I actually used for this demo. So I'll go back now again to my list of experiments here. And you can see I was trying different things here, right? So I have two k-means clustering algorithms. It allowed me to kind of play with and evaluate different, in this case, I was trying the same algorithm, but using different parameters. So, for this first one here, you can see I used 3 centroids. The other one I used 5. You can also drop in like Python code if you want to start to visualize, okay, what's the optimum number of centroids using like an elbow chart, or you can also drop in R modules. So once I had played around with this, I figured out what the best results were. I converted this into a predictive experiment. And a predictive experiment just removes stuff that's not required during that kind of training and discovery phase, and allows you to define the input, define the output, and then create a consumable web service. So you would run this. Once this is done, you'd click, with a single click, you can convert it to a web service. And then once that's done, you'll have a web service here that provides some information on how to access it. You even have the ability of interacting with this algorithm using Excel. So there's a free add-in for Excel. So if you want to pass it off to business users and say, hey, does my clustering look right with these customers? And they say, well, how can I validate it? How can I consume it? Well, you have Excel. Yes, you can download a free add-in and you can try it out and punch in different values and see, hey, is the classification working properly or as I expected? And if I click on the request response, this is where I can get some details on how to call this API. So you can see here is the post, and here's what it's expecting from input. Here's what it's going to give you back as output, and it even down below gives you sample code that you can copy, paste, and tweak if you want to drop this into like an app or into any type of application or service. So, and actually I should show you what the data looks like too. So that's the machine learning studio that classifies customers, and it's based off of this data set that you can get for free. So again, same idea: channel, region, fresh, milk, grocery, all the same fields that you saw me entering into the Power App and that you saw displayed into the Power BI report. So once you have the Machine Learning Studio set up and converted into a predictive experiment, you can start to use it and integrate it into like things like Flow or any other like ETL or app or anything like that. So just kind of flipping back. So now kind of working our way out. So I skipped over the flow for a minute just because I wanted to show you where was this data coming from. And it was really based on this free data set that is available from this website here. And then you start to go and build the data set. So to do that, I'll go back into my Power BI report. So we know we need a data set that allows you to enter in like a customer, channel, region, fresh, right? All of these fields. To build a data set that allows for that real-time feedback, I need to create an API-enabled data set. And if I go to just my personal workspace, and I skip this little splash page here, I say, oh, I want to create a streaming data set. So you can do that by clicking on skipping over the splash page and clicking on streaming data set. And as I mentioned, I want the ability to push data into this data set. So it has to be API enabled. There are kind of three options here. There's Azure Stream. That's for really high velocity data. Think of that as like your sensor data where you're getting multiple readings per second. PubNub is basically same idea, focused at Java. For my purpose, I don't need that fast, that frequent. I need just the ability to near real time. So I just create an API enabled data set. So if you click next, then you say, okay, well, what do you want to call this, right? Sample. And let's say that this is the customer, it's text. Let's also create the channel. Now, keep in mind when you're building these API enabled data sets, the number of data types available is very limited, right? It's just text, number, date, time. And that's because it's key value pair, right? So any kind of complex data types are not available. Now, once you have created this data set, you need to make sure that you turn on this historical analysis. Because if you don't have it turned on, it doesn't store anything, and you literally can't see anything in the Power BI report. It holds on to nothing. I don't know why you would want to ever have it not hold on to anything, unless, to me, like, the historic data analysis, you just flip this on and off if you need to clear out what's already in there. So once you have that turned on, it will hold on to 200,000 records based on first in, first out. And if you need to go beyond 200,000, then you're going to want to use Flow to redirect some of that data into like a database or some kind of data storage mechanism. But for my purposes, 200,000 records, first in, first out, that's good enough. So once I'm happy with this, I'd click the create button, and then I would have a data set. Now, the challenge is when you're going and interacting with this data set, if you even select like a number, for example, let's say this was cost, and I said, oh, this is going to be a number. When I go and interact with that, cost field in Power BI, if I was going to build a report, it doesn't know that the cost should be formatted as a currency. So there's a little trick you can use to overcome that and have the ability of creating, measures that actually look appropriate. So if I click the create button and then I go into Power BI, I can go and get data and say, hey, I want to go get that data set, the API enabled one that I just built. And I'll select it here for a minute. And you'll navigate to the workspace. So I'm just going to select this wholesale customer one because this is one that I've been using. And you'll notice a couple of things when you go and do that. Now, I don't know if anybody, it was pretty quick, but the second I went and connected, I lost the ability to change the relationships or to shape the data. And that's because I'm connecting to a data set that's in the cloud, which is essentially equivalent to a tabular model. Because under the hood, analysis services and Power BI and Power Pivot, they all use the same Vertipack engine. It's all analysis services tabular model under the hood. And so if you ever work with Power BI against a tabular model, doing like a live connection, you know that you lose the ability to manipulate the data. It becomes more of like a governed data source, and Power BI just becomes more of a reporting tool. And if you look at the list of fields that I have available, you see that if I, for example, dropped on the fresh produce, right? It displays the data as just a numeric field, and I'll show you. Looks like here. So you can see, it doesn't think that this is currency because you have no ability in Power BI to do any formatting to modify this and say, hey, this actually should be formatted as a currency because this is not quite the right format. But you can see it's all grayed out, right? You don't have the ability of modifying it. So one way to overcome this limitation is to create a new measure based on that field. So if I say, hey, my new measure, and this is essentially leveraging the kind of feature that came out in Power BI, I believe it was early last year, or maybe even the year before, to add measures on top of a tabular model. So if I say that this is going to be, fresh, a new measure based off of that fresh field, I now have the ability of taking that fresh field and saying that this is a currency, general, and I will add that new field here, fresh. So now you can see same value, but now it's formatted as a $sign. So that's one thing, like a kind of tip to help, if you ever encounter that situation where you want to apply some more formatting, leverage the ability to create measures on top of a data set that's in the cloud, particularly if it's an API-enabled data set and you have a limited number of data type options. So once I created the data set, then I built out my Power BI report. And I'll flip to the final product here for a minute. So I added, for every one of my fields, I added a calculated measure, and I also added one bonus one, this total here, that just takes all of those other fields and adds them all up. So I can say, hey, in total, how much did this customer spend? And I just added up all of the other measures that I had created on top of the tabular model. So this was my one kind of report page. The other thing you have to do is add a widget to allow that data entry using Power Apps. Of course, I got to sign in for a minute. And the Power App visual inside Power BI, it doesn't come out of the box. It's something that you have to go and get. I'll skip over that for now. So to go and get that visual, you have to go and grab it from the marketplace. So it looks like this, Power Apps here. And if you want to go and grab it, you have to get from the marketplace a custom visual. So in the marketplace here, there should be a visual for Power Apps. You can see here. And you click add, and then it will say, okay, sign in. Which app do you want to add into your report once you've signed in? And once you're signed in, you go and click it, and then you go and deploy this report. So once it's been deployed, now you have all of the kind of components in place to start building a dashboard. So I'll click cancel here, go back to my customer segmentation. So as I mentioned, this is the report that I went and built using the desktop tool. I went and added the data entry field. So you can see on the second page here, for it, there is a Power App that allows me to go and enter data in and hit the submit button, so it goes in real time. Now, the one other thing that you need to do, and this is a one-time setup, is you need to register the Power BI app inside. So basically, this allows you to push data into it. And so registering the Power BI app inside Azure Active Directory, you do that by navigating to this URL here. So dev.powerbi.com/apps. Navigate to this thing, click sign in, then enter in the values here and click on the different features that you want to enable, the different API endpoints that you want to enable. This is a one-time setup that you have to do for your Power BI app. Essentially, you need to allow different components to push data into it. If you don't do this, you won't have the ability in Flow to go and automatically push data into this API-enabled data set. So once you have this registered, then you can, forever going forward, you can build new Power BI reports and allow different tools like Flow or Logic apps or whatever to interact with it through API calls. So the kind of next piece of the puzzle that we're missing, and I'll just again go back to here. So I talked about the API-enabled data set, showed you how to create that, showed you the Power App, showed you the Azure Machine Learning part. The last kind of piece of the puzzle is the flow, and that's the glue or the integration component that enables you to hit the submit button and have the data flow through and get surfaced up in real time back inside that Power BI dashboard. So how do you do that? Well, first thing you got to do is log into Microsoft Flow, and maybe I'll just show you what that looks like for a minute when you log in. So when you log in to Flow, you'll see something like this, and what you're going to want to do is create a brand new flow, and you can do it off of a template. They have a lot of different templates available for different scenarios that you can essentially quick start your development process and tweak and configure. I believe there's also even one for pushing data into Power BI. Let's take a quick look here if there is one. But you can see there are lots of different options available. Here's one that kicks off a flow based on a alert in Power BI. Might not be one exactly in our scenario, but what I did was created a brand new blank one. And it's very similar to the other, like Power Apps and Azure Machine Learning Studio. It's guided development, kind of drag, drop, and configure. So if you create a brand new one from blank, you can go and say, okay, well, what's the thing that's going to, kick off this flow? It all starts with like a trigger, or it could be based on a scheduled event. In my situation, I actually wanted to kick off something from Power App. So I'll skip this and I'll show you what my flow looks like. So the first thing I did is in my flow, I have an action here that says, hey, start this flow gets triggered from a Power App, and it actually gets triggered from that submit button that you see on the app. The next thing I have is some conditional logic, and I just say, okay, well, if that category field that's in my app, which is back here, the one down below, if that is blank, then I need to go down this path. If it does have something in it, then I need to go down this path and just enter the data right into my API-enabled data set. And first, I'll show you what it looks like if we, have a value already specified. So if we have something in this category row, it goes and adds a row into the Power BI data set, and it uses all of the fields that I have defined inside my Power App. And when you go and drag the the Power App onto here, the second you go and say, okay, take an action after this app triggers the flow, it will automatically know that the app has these fields in it. So when I go and try to create, and I can show you what this looks like for a minute too. I'll add an action here, a blank one for a minute, and say, okay, well, you can do all kinds of different actions. And I'll show you what it looks like with the Power BI. So if I add rows to a data set, it'll say, hey, well, what data set, what workspace? And again, because I'm logged in with that same account that I'm using for Power Apps and for Power BI, it knows that, hey, these are the things you have access to. These are the apps, these are the data sets. So because I'm using my single kind of a same account across the board, it'll automatically pick up and say, hey, these are the workspaces you have available. So if I select the customer segmentation workspace, I can go and say, hey, I have a wholesale customer data set. That was the API enabled data set that I created earlier. And it says, okay, well, these are the tables that you have available inside that data set. And because this is an API enabled data set, there'll only be one table in there, and the name of it is called real-time data. That's something that gets created, that name gets created for you, and you can't change that. And then you can fill out things like, okay, the customer name. Well, what needs to go into this customer name? And so there's two ways to drop data into it, through dynamic content or through expressions. And when you first click on the field, it will automatically pop up a list of all of the content that it has available. And you can see that it knows, hey, I have a customer name that's available for me. That's what I want to go into that customer name field in my data set. I want to grab that from the Power App. That's the same field. And you basically go all the way through this thing until it's all populated. So when you're done, it ends up looking like this. So every field that has been defined in my app has been mapped to a field in my API enabled data set. So that's great. So that's how I'm able to, in real time, get data through a flow into my API enabled data set. The other scenario that I showed was if I don't populate the category, I don't know which category this customer belongs to. I'm leveraging my machine learning experiment, my clustering algorithm, to put this customer into an appropriate category based on, what channel they're from, what region, based on all of these numeric fields, right? I use these things to determine which category should they fall under. So that follows down this side of the conditional logic, where the category is left blank, and then I go and call the Azure Machine Learning Studio API. And again, this data, this information on what the post URL is, and all this information on the authorization token and the fields, all of this stuff you can get from Azure Machine Learning Studio. So if you go into the experiment, and then you click on that request response link there, it'll send you to get to the Swagger documentation where you can get the information regarding this post thing. You can get the authorization, the bearer token from the first, the API key from the first page here. And then you can also get all the details too on, okay, what does it expect to look like for input? So you can just copy this and paste that into your flow. You need to tweak a little bit because this example, they're expecting 2 rows come in. We're only putting 1 row in at a time. You can also see what is going to be coming back. So all the information that you need to build the flow is available. You just got to copy, paste, and tweak it a little bit. So, this input, you can see it just got rid of the second values and said, hey, you know what, instead of putting all zeros in, I want to use those fields from the Power App. I want to use the channel, the region, the fresh, the milk, all the numeric fields I want to use to go and predict what category they might belong to. So this HTTP call, post request, basically goes and says, hey, I'm sending this data up to that Azure Machine Learning Studio web service with the value coming from the Power App, and it sends a response back, a JSON response. Now you have to parse it. Thankfully, there is another action inside Flow that allows you to easily parse that JSON response back. And you can actually generate the schema using a sample payload. So you can click on this sample payload, and again, going back to your information in Azure Machine Learning Studio, you can copy and paste this sample request and drop it into that flow and then hit done, and it will automatically go and create the schema that you need based on that information. And then the last step, again, very similar to the situation where we need to have all the data get passed into the API enabled data set. Everything is the same here except for this very last thing. All I'm doing with this is I'm using an expression to further refine what results I'm getting out of the JSON response. And I'll show you what that this expression looks like. So this is a scenario where we have to drop in a little bit of code. It's expression based. And I basically say, okay, well, because the JSON response comes back with a whole bunch of like nested results, I just say go and grab the first value out of this kind of nested JSON response from the Azure Machine Learning Studio. And this just allows me to avoid the scenario where by default, if I were just to go and grab the, because there is the option of not doing expression, doing dynamic content and saying, hey, go and grab the values out of the JSON response. It knows that this is nested, so it will automatically add in a looping mechanism, which you don't really need. So it speeds things up by using that expression to go and grab the first value out of the values JSON structure, essentially. So now you have the flow hooked up. The very last thing that you need to do, because again, this is the glue that will kick off and pass data from the Power App and push it into Power BI, into an API-enabled data set, and it will either go down the path where you have the category defined, in which case it doesn't need to use machine learning, or if you don't have the category defined, it will call the API to go and determine which category to put them in. The last thing you need to do is inside the app is modify that submit button here, this button, and you need to say, okay, I want to trigger a flow. So I'll show you what that looks like. So if I go and insert a new button here, by default, a button does nothing. So you have to add an action to it. So this new button here, I just dropped into the canvas of the report. And if I want to say, okay, well, I'll do something, there's different things I can do. What I want it to do is kick off a flow. And again, because I'm logged in with the same account, it knows all of the possible flows that I have access to. So I can go and say, hey, kick off this flow. I think I have 2 of them. And it will go and connect it. And then it says, hey, it knows that the flow expects certain parameters, because if I go back to the flow, you can see that in the flow, I'm using all of these fields like customer, name, channel, region, fresh, milk, grocery. All of these things are essentially arguments or parameters that are required by the flow and that you need to be passed to it inside the app when you call it. So no, I'm not going to fill it all out. So this is the call to the flow. It says run it, and then it's expecting all these parameters. And so if you fill it all out, the parameters are expecting are the text name, right? So again, going back to what's on the canvas of the report, here's the customer's name. That's one of the first parameters it's expecting. That's the first one I send it. Second one I send them is the channel, then the region, then the fresh produce, all the way down the list. So I pass in the values of every single field into the flow. and then you have the ability of, when you click the button, kicking off a flow and automating that whole workflow and passing data right away back through to that Power BI dashboard in real time, so you can get that immediate feedback and immediately see, okay, how are my customers looking with regards to getting updates. Now, one thing to be mindful, whenever you're making changes to your app or modifying your app in any way, you need to publish it. So I'll maybe show you from it what that is. So inside here, you have to click save, and then you also need to publish it. I think right now it's waiting for me to save it because it has pending changes. But just be mindful that if you do make changes, you need to publish it, and that's required to, the first time you do it, to see it inside Power BI, and if you make any changes to it, you need to publish a new version. Otherwise, whatever you see inside Power BI will be a prior version. And so then once all these things are hooked up, then you have the ability of doing that really quick, immediate, insights to action and automation. So you're analyzing data, trying to understand your customers, you're speaking with a new customer, you're entering their information, you're hitting the submit button, and you're right away able to see and do analysis on that and compare customers and see how does it affect my portfolio, how does it look with regards to spending. The last thing you can even do too is if you say, hey, you know what? I want to, if they end up spending more money than, like more than $2,000, I can create another alert here, and you can even do some further automation. So you can say, hey, if they spend more than, let's say 3,000, I can go and trigger an alert that goes and sends me an email to say, hey, I better follow up with this customer. But you can even do more interesting things like kick off a flow. So you could say, hey, if the spend is more than 3,000, kick off a flow and create a record in my customer relationship management system that says, hey, follow up the customer and thank them for spending with us. Or if their spending drops below a certain threshold, maybe you send out another task inside your CRM to have someone contact them and follow up, and maybe it's an email or a phone call. So there's all these interesting automation and integration patterns that are opening up, and now we're at the time to try to figure these things out and discover and implement them, because there's possibilities here that were never available before, and you can do it all very quickly with minimal amount of code, mostly just drag, drop, configure, maybe a little bit of tweaking expressions here and there, but it's nothing, no heavy duty coding required. And one other tip too, if you're doing alerts inside dashboards, use relative measures, not absolutes. If I were to create an alert on here and say if their spend is more than 3,000, that means that once I've passed that, I'm going to have to update this alert every time. So it's better to do something where, if their spend is more than 5% than last month, then do something, or less than 5%. So setting up alerts on relative measures is better than setting it up on absolutes, because then you don't have to go and tweak the rules as much, and they will just go and trigger automatically. So just to kind of recap, I know I covered a lot of ground today. So the first thing I showed you was that Power App embedded inside a Power BI dashboard, and it really allows you to enter in new records and provide that quick real-time feedback. The Power App, when they hit the submit button, it kicks off a flow, because we had a trigger on the button that was tied to a flow, and the flow goes and passes data. It does a little check to see, hey, is the category there or not? If the category is not there, then pass the data to Azure Machine Learning Studio and use a clustering algorithm to determine which category to put this customer in. If the category is there, then just use it. And the last thing the flow does is push that data into an API-enabled data set in Power BI. That allows you to get that immediate, feedback. Less than 5 seconds, you see the new record show up, and you see all the visuals update based on that new record that was just entered in via the Power App embedded in Power BI. And then the last thing I just touched on was the ability inside a dashboard to add data alerts to tiles to further automate actions. You can even do things like, have an email come back, or have it create a record inside your CRM system to follow up with the customer and say, hey, looks like your sales are down or your sales are up. I'm going to send you a gift basket or something like that. So there's really new and powerful ways to automate these, integrate these capabilities with minimal amount of code, minimal amount of effort. I put this all together in, I think, about a day and a half. If you're interested in doing this yourself, I blogged about this in explicit detail. You can follow all the steps that I showed you, and actually just to kind of show you what that looks like. So this is my blog here, and so here are, it's essentially 6 steps. I had one extra step that I didn't show you, which was pushing it into dynamics. So if you want to try this out, I highly recommend you look up my blog, and then you can try it yourself. And also follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn. I regularly, post things, send updates, and if you have any follow-on questions, let me know. And now it's just going to open up. I know we're short on time, but if there are any pressing questions, I can answer them.
So I mean, it looks like you. I mean, it's amazing how much you just brought together that quickly. I remember the old days. That's a lot of work. So just one thing I kind of noticed is you never actually persisted the data anywhere, if you think about it. Is that right?
That's right.
Because everything is just passing messages.
That's right. So I'm using the, in the API-enabled data set in Power BI, if you turn on the history, it will store 200,000 records, right? And it's based on first in, first out. So if I do get to more than 200,000, I'll start losing the old stuff. But if I wanted to, I could add a parallel branch inside the flow, and then have that parallel branch push data into data storage, right, into a database or into
an archiving kind of process.
Archiving, exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. That's
okay. Cool. Okay. So we have a couple of quick questions here. Kenneth wanted to know, you spoke about what is a node for Power BI.
So a node.
So I think that was specifically referred to at the enterprise.
Yeah.
For premium. Sorry.
Yeah. For Power BI Premium, a node is basically a dedicated set of resources in a Microsoft data center that is only available to you and gives you better performance and gives you some extra features. So basically it's part of Power BI Premium. When you're purchasing Power BI Premium, you pick how many nodes you need, and the number of nodes you need is variable depending on how many users you have and what type of workloads you need to cover.
Okay, that's great. Another question from Kenneth. He just asked if you could provide links for the links to the free versions of Power BI, Flow, and Power Apps. I assume you should be able to find all of that in your blog, perhaps?
Yeah, I do believe I have the links, but if I don't have them, I could add them into my blog, or you can always just look them up on like Bing or Google. Like they'll for Flow, for Power BI, and for Azure Machine Learning Studio. Actually, everything that I showed you today can be done. Most things can be done with the free version, except for the only thing you can't do using the free version is embedding that Power App inside Power BI.
All right.
That requires Pro.
Okay. Question from Sandeep. Can all of this be done with the Pro license, or do you just need Premium, which I think you pretty much just answered?
Yeah, everything except embedding that app inside Power BI can be done for free.
Cool. Then Jose wants to know if you could do the opposite of what you've done and actually embed a Power BI report within a Power App.
Yes, you can. And that's actually a very interesting thing I was going to try out too, is have my Power App that's embedded in my Power BI dashboard have another Power BI report embedded inside that Power App.
So like an Inception kind of.
Yeah, that's right. Whose dream are you in? The dream of Power BI or...
Okay, final question from Danny. He was wondering if it is possible to perform updates. It's obviously against that data set, once it's gone to that streaming set.
No, unfortunately, it's it's not updatable, and that's one scenario where if you want to go and update something that was data entry error, I would have the flow push the data into something that's persisted and available, like a SQL database, right? And then you can go and edit it.
Okay.
And you could still get the real-time feedback. Like what you would do is have Flow push the data into a database and then have Power BI hooked up via like a live connection, right?
Yeah.
And then you can still get that kind of near real-time